The views expressed and opinions given by the individual hosts and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Z-Talk Radio, its affiliates, or sponsors.
Are you sitting comfortably? Then we'll begin.
Welcome, and you are listening to the Warren Exchange.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Warren Exchange. I'm your host, Al Warren, and today I'm very pleased to feature author Micheal Hughes from Random House Hydra. He's the author of the Blackwater Lights and the newly released Witch Lights. And I hope you enjoyed the show. Right after this.
Bud Light presents Real Men of Genius.
Real Men of Genius.
Today we salute you, Mr. In-the-Car Nose Picker.
Mr. In-the-Car Nose Picker.
For you, the daily commute isn't simply a drive to the office. It's a hands-on exploration deep into your schnoz.
I'm going in now.
With pinpoint accuracy and sheer determination, you dig for boogers like miners dig for gold.
Hit the jackpot.
And why do you do it? 'Cause the windows are up and you think we can't see you. We can.
How you doing?
So crack open an ice cold Bud Light, oh nabber of the nose nugget. We'd like to shake your hand, but you'll have to wash it first.
Mr. In-the-Car Nose Picker.
Bud Light Beer, Anheuser-Busch, St. Louis, Missouri.
Ranger Station.
Yeah, hi. I'd like to report a bear sighting in the forest. 1 second, I'm having a smoke. Next thing I know, I'm face-to-face with Smokey Bear.
Wow.
And he told me it only takes one spark to start a wildfire.
Did you know 9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans?
I had no idea.
That's why Smokey's famous and you're not. If you see someone in danger of starting a wildfire, step in and make a difference. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at smokeybear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
An old man turned 98. He won the lottery and died the next day. It's a black fly in your Chardonnay. It's a death row pardon, 2 minutes too late. And isn't it ironic? Don't you think? It's like rain on your wedding day. It's a free ride when you've already paid. It's the good advice that you just didn't take. And who would have thought it's bigger?
I said I want the truth. You can't handle the truth. I said I want the truth. You can't handle the truth.
Okay, we're back now, and joining us is Micheal M. Hughes, author of a couple of books, Blackwater Lights and the sequel Witch Lights, and very interesting fellow here. He's got lots to talk about. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, Al. Thanks for having me on your show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Actually, I've been looking forward to it for a while, and it's great. I love following you on Facebook. I love some of what you say and do.
Oh, good. I try to keep things interesting.
Yeah.
More so than just cat pictures and pictures of my kids and stuff like that. So
yeah, when you go out for lunch, you're. So let's start with you first of all. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got into writing books, or what you're doing now.
Yeah, well, I've always been a big reader. Even as a kid, I really loved. I was lucky in that, when I was a kid in the '70s, the books that I could get at the little Scholastic book fair and things like that were just really, really solid classics of imaginative literature. Everything from H.G. Wells and The Time Machine to classic horror like, Dracula and Frankenstein. Those were the books that kind of put in front of me. So, naturally I just gobbled that stuff up. But, I always had a leaning towards, things that were a little unusual. So I gravitated a lot towards horror and, dark fantasy, things like that. And at the same time that I was developing that interest in fiction, again, it was the '70s, it was the era of, In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy on TV and Chariots of the Gods in the movie theaters and things like that. So, it was really there was a resurgence in popular media that looked at the paranormal and the supernatural, the strange, the occult. So it was a really great time to be a kid. And, I just kind of absorbed all this stuff. My father had an interest in paranormal and UFOs and things like that. So he'd leave books lying around the house, which I would then pick up and read. So, I had this kind of strange childhood in that I was, at the same time, I was really starting to enjoy fiction and the depiction of the supernatural and the strange, the unusual in fiction. I was also really getting immersed in, the real stuff, people that examined everything from UFOs to ghosts to near-death experiences. And, really those formative days of my youth really kind of made me who I am now. Some people get into cars, some people get into computers. I got into all this weird stuff, and that's kind of where I've been happy to be. I'm in my 40s now, and right before my first daughter was born, I finally decided, I got to stop just consuming this stuff. I really want to tell my own stories. And I read Stephen King's book on writing. I don't know if you've ever read that, but it's part half autobiography of King and it's half sort of about the craft of writing. And I read that book and I said, you know what? I'm just going to try. I'm going to take all this crazy stuff in my head and put it down on paper, and hopefully somebody somewhere will want to read it. And turns out they do. Turns out a lot of people actually like it.
Oh, that's a good thing. I saw you were lucky enough now, so you just met Stephen King, didn't you, to go to get a book signing? And
yeah, well, I didn't meet him. He did a talk last night in D.C., and it was great. And what it really reminded me of is how Mark Twain, back in his day, I mean, Twain was he was like a superstar. As a writer, he would just go around and go on these speaking tours and, sell out these giant halls. And to see Stephen King, who's always been one of my favorite writers, just up on stage, just talking about his books, reading from his books, talking about himself, it really reminded me of Twain, and how I thought how cool it is that someone who writes for a living and spends most of their time, all by themselves, just tapping away at a keyboard, can, get out in front of so many fans, so many people that really love and appreciate the writing. So I didn't get to meet him personally, but they were giving books away at the end, and I think a few out of the several hundred were autographed, and by chance or divine providence or whatever, I opened the book and there was his signature on it. So that was a really nice plus.
That's lucky.
Yeah.
Do you have any influences outside of, let's say, like Stephen King or people that have been into the horror or the real ghost hunters and stuff like that? Is there stuff totally opposite that influences you?
Well, my writing is pretty much, kind of immersed in in the worldview, the stuff that I've absorbed over the years. But I do like to read sort of widely. I think it's people can get stuck in a rut and just read, one sort of genre or one thing. I like imaginative fiction of all kinds. I like Borges. Who's not a horror writer, but he's interesting. He's a philosophical, experimental writer, and I like people that kind of challenge reality and worldviews. I like Robert Anton Wilson, who I think is one of the smartest philosophers to ever set foot on the planet, and a really underrated guy. But he wrote crazy, science fiction conspiracy stuff like the Illuminatus trilogy. But he also wrote philosophical books about how we understand reality, how we process reality, our reality tunnels, and how important it is to step outside of our belief systems to look at things through the belief systems of others. So, yeah, I mean, I try to just read stuff that's challenging and kind of, mind expanding, because that's what I like. That tweaks me. When I read a book and it tweaks me in that way, that's something new, a different way of thinking about something, that's what makes a good book for me.
Yeah. So what inspired you to write the very first book? The first book was Blackwater Lights.
That's correct. Blackwater Lights came out last year, and it's published by Random House, and they have an imprint called Hydra, which is a digital-only imprint, and that's for science fiction, horror, and fantasy. So the book's only available right now as a digital book through Hydra, through Random House. So I like to say that off the bat, because a lot of people don't like to read ebooks or won't read ebooks. But if you do, that's the way this book is delivered. It's, unless you read German, it's coming out in Germany in paper next year. So what's funny, I'll have a copy of my book on my shelf that I can't read at all. But it's that book was really my first attempt. It was my first novel, so I feel really lucky. Most people have to go through 3 or 4 or 5, half a dozen attempts before they get something that sells. And this was something I finished about 9 years ago. And I got an agent pretty quickly, so I started thinking about my dream house by the lake, where I would sit and write for the rest of my life full time. And then I quickly found, as the agent sent it around, it started getting rejections and more rejections. And I started sending it to smaller publishers, and then even smaller diminutive publishers. And it was just getting rejected, even though I had worked on it back and forth with my agent, polishing it up. So it was a little disheartening to go from elation through the process of rejection, but it's normal. That's what happens. And one day I heard about this new digital imprint from Random House, and I connected with the editor there. She loved it. And, the book, I wound up having a 3-book contract for this trilogy. So it worked out really well. But the book was my first attempt to take all that stuff I was mentioning, all the conspiracy theories I'd read, all of the occult, the weird occult experiments that went on in the government, and ideas I'd taken from H.P. Lovecraft of cosmic horror and elder gods and all that stuff, and it just started spilling out, and it spilled out in a nice narrative too. So I got engaged with the character, the bad guys I was building up just got darker and badder as the story progressed. And it really was a way for me to explore, not just the stuff that I was interested in, but some very profound experiences that I'd also had. That book gave me a chance to kind of work it out in fiction, and try to understand those experiences.
Okay. And now the Witch Lights, now that's a sequel to it, right? That's the second one.
That's the sequel that just came out in October. So if anyone's interested in reading the books, you really do have to read Blackwater Lights first. People who have just read Witchlights are leaving really nice reviews about how much they enjoyed it. But to me, I can't imagine reading a second book in a series without reading the first. So that I would encourage everybody to read Blackwater Lights first.
Yeah, because they'll miss out on certain things, right? Like
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's a story that builds and progresses, and if you miss that whole first chunk, you're going to miss a lot of the motivation, a lot of the backstory, and a lot of important stuff. So yeah, so please read Blackwater Lights first.
Yeah, otherwise you won't know anything about the character, like or
exactly
Lily or your yeah. There's certain things you're not going to really understand. Well, so what? So now the third one will become. So you have like a whole big idea with all three of these. Like this is all kind of. Did you sort of have the whole idea in your mind?
Actually, I didn't. But what I've always admired in other writers, going back to especially to Lovecraft and all his collaborators, was they created, a really big but yet believable mythology. And I've always thought it's such a refreshing thing when a book can create its own mythology, but yet still feel very tied to the real world. Like that's what I was going for. So this book is about this. When you really boil it down, it's about the idea that there are secret organizations working that have worked through human history. And they've infiltrated positions of power to advance their agendas. These organizations might be good, they might be sort of neutral, they might be pretty awful. But the idea that there are these sort of currents flowing behind the scenes in the world, especially in the world of politics, in the world, the chambers of power and things like that, that's always really fascinated me. I mean, I think in real life, the world's a pretty screwed up place. And there really aren't a lot of people pulling strings, from a really high up sort of perspective. But I love that idea that there are these elements that are hidden in society that are sort of pushing culture one way or the other, manipulating events, changing the course of history that we really don't know about. And this book is about, essentially, it's a clash of two sort of occult-based organizations that have been fighting a perpetual war since, the beginning of time, and how that plays out within within a family unit with the character Ray, the woman he's in love with, Ellen, and her young son. So there's a little triangle of people, but when you expand outward at the bigger picture, you realize there's all these forces at play that are working on them.
Yeah, that is very real life, isn't it?
I think so. I mean, we all feel like we're very much individuals, but we're all, there's all sorts of things that push us in one direction or another, either socially or unconsciously, or behind the scenes we're manipulated certain ways by people through political propaganda or media consumption, things like that. So we really are part of a bigger picture, and that's what I like to portray in my fiction.
Yeah, it's almost like a society forced way of doing things,
Yeah, I mean, we all make our way through our lives, and I think a lot of times we don't kind of look at the bigger picture and see how we are sort of being pushed along and manipulated as well, and it's a little disconcerting, when people come to realize that. But it's better. I always think it's better to have knowledge than to just be kind of a pawn in someone else's game.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's just I think it takes away the illusion, right? That
absolutely
everybody's happy about. It's
yep.
It's really quite sad, actually. But I just can't find where you could go, because it seems like without even picking out a political or religious affiliation. It seems like all organized groups have that sort of, I don't even want to use the word agenda, but there's a direction behind it.
Yeah, and that's the key. That's why I like Robert Anton Wilson so much. You know, his whole philosophy was really to sort of liberate your thinking from patterns and institutionalized belief systems. Really, like Timothy Leary, you know, is fond of saying, "Think for yourself." You know, think for yourself. Question authority, and like you said, that could be scary when you start to realize, you know, how little freedom you may have had because you're just following these unconscious scripts and what society would like you to do. But then at the same time, it's also very liberating, and that really is the key. That's why I find, you know, I'm certainly not a fan of organized, you know, religion or spirituality, but I love renegade spiritualists, and you know, I'm always attracted to sort of the wild mystics and the you know, the crazy people, the occultists, the ones who are making their own thing up as they go along. Like that. That's what I like. That's what I really find fascinating.
Certainly more interesting, more creative than just following a pattern. You know,
yeah, absolutely. You know, and those are the, you know, it's some people are very happy living a very, you know, prescribed, you know, easy template of a life, you know, and I'm happy for them, and if that makes them happy, that's great. But to me, the fun stuff is in the people who are kind of monkeying around, you know, inside the workings of things and taking things apart and trying new ways of spirituality, or new ways of living, or new ways of writing or thinking. That's you know, some of us like novelty, some of us like, you know, tradition and comfort, and I'm definitely on the far end of the novelty spectrum.
Yeah, it's exciting when I hear or when I read people that are that way. You know, some of the things going on, you know, right now. I just some of it's kind of fun. I like I know, I don't know if you've probably heard of Russell Brand, right?
Oh yeah. He's great.
Yeah, I think that's fascinating, the stuff he's doing, and it just kind of breaks the pattern.
Yeah, it does, and it's you know, it's sometimes when things get like they are now. I mean, just speaking really simple truths, you know, which he does pretty well, and you know, in an entertaining way, can be a radical act in itself, and you know, it's days like today when, you know, I'm looking at Facebook and all it is Kim Kardashian's ass, oiled ass. I'm thinking, you know, we really need to grow up a little bit as humans.
Yeah. I don't understand how that, you know, you can turn on one of the major networks and that's their headline news.
Yeah.
And then you can go to the BBC News and they don't even mention it. They're talking about the landing on the comet.
Right, exactly.
And, you know, and they don't even mention it on the news. It's like not even in the top 30 minutes. It's Kardashian's oily ass. Is it airbrushed or not? Yeah. It's like, what? Like,
yeah, I do fear for humanity sometimes. I really do. I mean, we're like little monkeys and we like shiny things and you know, the pictures of you know, I mean, there's nothing certainly wrong with naked you know, people. That's how we all come into the world. We're all, you know, nakedness is very beautiful, but you know, at the same time, like you said, we've just landed this probe on an asteroid or comet, you know, flying through space, and yet, you know, so many people would rather look at someone's butt.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's a time and place. I just think that when I turn on the news, I want to hear about the comet. I want to hear about that. I don't want to hear about Kardashian's oily ass. I mean,
yeah. You know what really changed my perception. I mean, it was a really defining moment, and that was before the first Gulf War. when George Bush Sr. was president. He basically invaded, moved into Kuwait and chased Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. And the oil rigs were all on fire, and it was horrifying. But before that war started, there was a huge anti-war movement, and I happened to be part of it. I went to Washington, D.C. for a protest. There were hundreds of thousands of people. I think it was the first anti-war protest that had actually ever, especially on that scale, that had taken place before a war had even started. So, and there were people, as I looked around, I'm like, this is middle America right here. I mean, there's clergy people, nuns, veterans, teachers. It was really a fascinatingly diverse group of people who were just trying to stop this war from happening. So that day, I took the bus back from DC to Baltimore and came in, turned on CNN, and what CNN decided to show from that entire event was a guy in a tie-dye T-shirt, just sort of noodle dancing, and that's what they presented to the rest of the public. I mean, it was the most perverse, blatant propaganda I had ever seen. And I remember at that moment something snapped in my head, and I said, we've entered an era now where, the days of like Walter Cronkite, on TV telling the news as news, as stuff that's really happening. I mean, we just completely inverted that to the point where we're being just fed this crafted message that whoever's crafting the message wants us to see. And the same thing happened in the last Gulf War with Colin Powell holding up a vial of anthrax or something. It was just it was a sideshow. And but you really hit on something, or maybe I hit on something with the Kardashian overtake of the internet today, and that's that the news has skewed completely towards entertainment now, and that's been happening for a long time. It's nothing new. It's not some big observation, but really when you turn on the news, which I seldom do anymore because I've lost so much faith in it, unless if I get most of my news from reading, that it's, especially if you're away from it for a while and you go back. I mean, it's appalling. It's entertainment. It's entertainment first and foremost, packaged in a certain way to sort of facilitate a certain agenda. It's horrifying.
Yeah. Journalism's gone out the door. Because that's the most. It is totally entertainment, and it's about looks, and there's very little research done in it. They make so many mistakes. They don't do any research. It's just.
Well, another big problem is the newspapers are dying, and newspapers, local newspapers used to do a lot of superb journalism. I feel sorry for people going into journalism now because, the real journalism, the pool of people who's doing real journalism is shrinking and shrinking, and it's just more of an echo chamber. You go to blogs, if you're a liberal, you look at your liberal blogs, and it's all the same stories recirculated by, just back and forth, back and forth. If you're conservative, you've got your own little conservative, self-reinforcing world, and it's just stuff that's being regurgitated and reblogged, and there's very little, solid journalism happening anymore, and that's awful for society. Luckily there are some eruptions of things sometimes, like WikiLeaks or some of the material that Anonymous distributed. So there is sort of a crowdsourced element that is sort of fighting back this corporate journalism, but it's a difficult battle.
Yeah. The mainstream public's going for, the network. That's how it is. And did you find the publishing market much the same when you got into it, or?
Well, actually, I've been pretty happy with my publisher. it was, people, people like to promote self-publishing, and I think that's fantastic. I know a lot of self-published writers. I know some who have done very well, but I also, there's a reason why there are gatekeepers in publishing, and that's because there's such an enormous amount of crap out there. There's Sturgeon's law said 90% of science fiction is crap, but 90% of just about anything is crap. So, what publishers do, good editors, good agents, is they try to find the stuff that they know is good. So they're essentially weeding out all that stuff out there. This ever increasing pile of information. And so while I love the fact that it's so easy to self-publish now, I think there's also a good reason for traditional publishers to do what they do and that they exist. And I'm actually quite happy. I had a lot of people pushing me to self-publish, like you wrote a good book. It had no one's buying it. Why don't you just self-publish? But I wanted to hold out, because I think if you want to create a career and do this for a living, there are things a publisher could do for you that you can't do for yourself. I mean, they have marketing knowledge, they've got connections, and so I've been really happy to be with one of the big five. It's been a great experience. My editor's fantastic. She gets what my style. She likes the stuff I write, and they've been really good at getting it out there to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It was like anything. You turn on the TV or you turn on any of it, there's just so many channels, so much garbage now. They're filling it with anything.
Yeah, and it's a difficult time to be a writer or any kind of content creator, really, because there is so much stuff. I mean, I have an iPad. I read a lot of books on my iPad, but it's so easy while you're reading a book on your iPad. You get a little bing, a little alert comes up, and someone posted this on Facebook. And before you know it, you're an hour has passed, and you've essentially just kind of grazed. I mean, it's like you're just a cow on a hill, just chomping down grass all day long, and at the end of the day, you're like, what did I accomplish? So, with so much now, with games, great TV shows and movies, and it's just endless the way that people could choose to entertain or occupy themselves. Now, I'm a person, I can't sit and play Candy Crush or Solitaire for 5 hours, but a lot of people like that. It makes them happy. I just hope that there's going to be, a continuing group of people who like to read. I think there's something about reading fiction in particular, that is just such a unique, kind of experience, and such an enriching experience compared to a lot of this other stuff. And of course, I write books. I want there to be people that still read books out there, or else there's no reason for me to continue doing what I do.
Well, I hope they keep books. I mean, I have an iPad and all that too, but I just had young man cataracts, so I just had both eyes operated on.
Oh, wow.
Oh, I know. And I'll tell you, it's hard to read on the iPad and stuff.
Is it really? Does it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So do you? I guess you use glasses when reading off paper and stuff like that, right? I mean, is that?
Well, I do, but the thing is, when you have young man cataracts, I never needed glasses before, so
okay.
I went right into where how they do it. They cut in, take out your lens, put in a new one, right? So
right.
When you go from not having glasses to all of a sudden your brain can't move the eye or adjust the lens, it takes not like an older person that gets these done can be fine in a week or two. For someone younger with no glasses, you wait for about a year. And so you got a 12-month cycle of where it's slowly changing and they're learning to adjust. Really unusual. So you keep getting new. I go in again tomorrow. You keep getting new lenses every 3 months.
Oh man.
Oh, tell me about it. And I used to read like crazy. I mean, I've read all day, all night. To go from that to everything being blurry, and then
oh no, it reminds me of the Twilight Zone episode where
the book
Burgess Meredith. Yeah, he's he all he wants to do is be left alone to read, and the world gets nuked, and he comes out of his fallout shelter, but he's happy because now he has all the time to read with no one to bother him, and he breaks his reading glasses. Yeah, that just makes me, that hurts every time I think of it.
Oh, tell me, it's just going into shock when you can't read. You're just like, and you're looking, and you go get glasses, and then it comes and it goes, even when you're wearing your glasses, and it hurts. Like one eye will ache and be sore. It's just, I don't recommend it, but I guess it's something you have to do, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Just a process, so it'll get better. So you got to keep having written books.
Yeah. Yeah, I like, I read a lot on the iPad, but I mostly fiction. Like I find fiction's a hell of a lot. Fiction is great on an iPad or a Kindle. But if it's a book, if it's like a book of, occult diagrams or something like that, or a dictionary of the supernatural, that, some kind of reference book that I'm going to use for either my fiction or just for my own, edification, I have to have it as a book. There's the digital experience. There's nothing like being able to flip through pages and stick a note on it, and so any nonfiction book that I'm going to reference, I have to have in paper. But if it's a novel, I can read it in any format.
Yeah, that's good. Well, let's take a short break here.
To celebrate the not normal Mini Cooper, we hired an expert to tell you about Mini telepathically.
Greetings. Relax and listen to my mind. The Mini Cooper hardtop comes with 37 mpg and go-kart handling.
Wait, that's not telepathy.
Listen again. The bigger four-door Mini Countryman has seating for 5.
Okay, you're just whispering.
You're still paying me for this.
Come see the 37 mpg Mini Cooper hardtop and the bigger Mini Countryman today. Visit miniusa.com/info for MPG details.
Ranger Station, Ranger speaking.
Hi, I'd like to report a bear sighting, as in Smokey Bear.
Continue.
I was burning yard waste. He told me to remember that if it's too hot to touch, it's too hot to leave.
9 out of 10 wildfires are caused by humans. That means 9 out of 10 wildfires can be prevented.
I know that now.
Thanks to me.
Actually, thanks to Smokey.
Get your Smokey on. Always burn responsibly and contact your local fire department for open burning regulations. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council. Learn more at SmokeyBear.com.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Last night a little dancer came dancing to my door. Last night a little angel came pumping on my floor. She said, come baby, got a license for love, and if it expires, pray help from above, because in the midnight hour she cried more, more, more. With a rebel yell, she cried more, more, more. Wow, in the midnight hour, babe, more, more, more. With a rebel yell, more, 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 more.
No smoking in this building.
What are you going to do? Charge me with smoking?
Okay, we're back now. And so we've been cutting on all sorts of areas here. I just, so now you were talking about some of the experiences that happened or that kind of led you to, in your books, Blackwater Lights. And what can you tell us about that?
Yeah. Well, there have been a couple of really pivotal experiences that kind of shook up my worldview. Maybe not shook it up, because I already was inclined to have an interest in the paranormal, the unexplained. But In 1990, I was at the beach with my girlfriend in Ocean City, Maryland. It's like a little resort town, actually a fairly big resort on the East Coast. And it was in September, so there weren't a lot of people around. And I'd been having all these dreams about UFOs and just all kinds of odd coincidences that sort of came together this one weekend when I was at the beach. And I had a really major dream. I mean, it was incredibly vivid, so much so that when I woke up, I wrote it down. You know, whenever I have a dream that feels kind of epic or meaningful, I always try to write it down. So this dream was about a conference, or actually more like a panel show on TV about UFOs. And there were a few people sitting around the table. One guy was a strict nuts and bolts UFO guy, like they're extraterrestrial, they're coming from outer space, they're aliens. There was another guy who was more like Jacques Vallée or John Keel, who was saying that, you know, these things they're real, but they're also somehow they interface with our consciousness. They're not just aliens and spaceships. It could be time travelers. It could be interdimensional things. It could be something that we can't quite wrap our heads around. And then there was another guy who was sort of like a David Icke, you know, ranting about they're lizards. You know, the Queen of England's a lizard. They're eating all our children, and the Illuminati is, you know, doing secret rituals to enslave us all. You know, things like that. So, and then there was a hardcore skeptic who was saying UFOs. It's all just misperceptions. It's hoaxes. It's crazy. It's woo. I think one of the most hideous words in the world is woo, because it could be applied to anything someone doesn't like. But so you know, I've got this crazy dream of. It's almost like there's a debate going on in my head between these characters about what are these things. You know, what is this phenomenon? What's behind it? So, you know, I wrote down this dream. It kind of stuck with me all day. And that evening, my girlfriend and I took a walk out on the beach. You know, it was like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. And it was a beautiful, starry, absolutely clear night. And some other kind of weird coincidental things happened that it would take too long to get into, but it really felt like something was building. You know, it was a really strange feeling. So I remember looking up at the sky, and beautiful, clear, starry night, like I said, and saying mentally in my head, okay, if you're out there, now is the perfect time to show yourself. You know, like, this is it. If you're out there and you can hear my thoughts, let's see it, you know. And it was about 98% just kind of a joke. You know, very little of me, tiny smidgen of me maybe thought that something would actually show up. Well, a few minutes later, I walked down towards the water's edge where my girlfriend was standing, and I saw her look up at the sky and point. She said, "What are those?" And when I looked, there were two orange lights, but they were spherical. They were, you know, I could see the outline. They weren't just like a flickering light. They looked like a solid light, you know, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And they were bobbing up and down, just kind of motionless, just bobbing. And then when I looked at them, they were bobbing, and all of a sudden they started moving rapidly across the sky. So, you know, there weren't a lot of Chinese lanterns back in those days, I don't think. And these, you know, were clearly something that were powered. I mean, they were propelling themselves across the sky. They weren't being blown around. You know, I grew up near an airport, so you know, I'm very familiar with what airplanes and helicopters and all that look like in the sky. These things were moving, and they were doing these crazy acrobatics too, which, you know, I mean, my jaw was just hanging open. And I remember saying, all I could say over and over was going, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," and my girlfriend saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God," and we're watching these things, and then they came together and sort of fused or overlapped or something, and then they flew like that, and then they separated again, and we're just, our litany of "Oh my God" is just continuing, and then they just shot off. I mean, like whipped off into the distance, almost to the point where you could barely see them. They were going so fast, and so I remember being shocked. I mean, I'd always been fascinated by UFOs. I'd always kind of wished that I would see something, but I kind of figured I probably wouldn't. I mean, but then to actually make this weird mental request and something actually shows up. That will flip your worldview, 180 degrees. And, so that was such a crazy event. And the more I thought about it, the more I really just needed to understand what that was. Someone might say, first of all, well, it's a coincidence. You just happen to say that thought, and whatever these lights were, they just happened to be there at the same time. But when I look at that, like I mentioned, that feeling that was building, all these weird little coincidences were happening that weekend, and then for it to culminate in asking for something to appear and seeing it actually appear. So that became this concentrated focus to my research, and it led me into things. It led me to ask the question, like, where else in our belief system, our culture, our mythology, do people try to summon something, And of course, one of the first things was, well, people, in religion, spirituality, people will try to have, bring down the Holy Spirit or Jesus, or, if they're Hindu, it might be, the spirit of, one of the many Hindu gods or something like that. And then also people that do like ritual and ceremonial magic. These are the people who for centuries in their little grimoires, have been writing, detailed descriptions of how to bring otherworldly entities into our world. So I got deeply immersed in studying all this stuff, going back to the medieval, texts, occult texts, and working my way up through the Renaissance and the Kabbalah, and looking at groups like the Golden Dawn and things like that, and really trying to understand, like, is there a connection between these lights we see in the sky, these alleged big-headed things that come into people's bedrooms? I mean, is this just another? Is this the same thing, the same intelligence, somewhere, that we can't quite figure out, but that tends to erupt into our world sometimes, and maybe we can bring it into the world? Is that a good thing? Do we want to do that? Are these intelligences, are they neutral? Are they good? Are they bad? Are they a mix of all these things? So it really opened this giant, box of Pandora's box of questions that honestly, I still don't have a real grasp on it, but I find it fascinating. And that's what I tried to do in Blackwater Lights and Witch Lights. In Blackwater Lights, the lights are, at first, the character Ray, the protagonist, he thinks they're UFOs. Of course, there's weird lights in the sky, they have to be. But then as he digs deeper into the mystery, it starts getting into more of this territory, like, are these things some sort of intelligence? Maybe they're not spaceships, maybe these mystery lights are ghost lights that people see, different places around the world, like the Marfa lights in Texas and the Brown Mountain lights. Maybe these are some kind of intelligence. Maybe there's a way to communicate with them. Maybe they're trying to communicate with us. So the idea that I could do this in fiction, I could get deep and explore this stuff in a way that's not only helping me understand it, but is also kind of fun for other people too. That's what really that thrills me about writing this kind of stuff that I do.
Yeah, that's really cool. So what do you think about, the paranormal or UFOs? And I know they're kind of different, but kind of the same. Did you have a belief in it before, let's say, that event, or have you had other events, or what?
Yeah, I the term belief is difficult for me, and that's another thing I kind of like to name check Robert Anton Wilson about, is because I think belief starts to kill understanding a lot of times. Since I've been into this stuff a lot, I've talked about it, I do talks, workshops, things like that. I go to conferences, and there, you go to a UFO conference, and there are people who believe that, the Pleiadian ascended masters are, speaking through them and have laid down all these, all these, ideas about how everything works, and it's gospel to them, because they've found something and they believe it. Or, belief works the other way, and then people who, you could show them some of the best evidence for anomalous phenomena like UFOs, for example. You can show them the best cases, and they'll just refuse to believe it because they believe it can exist. So for me, the approach of Charles Fort, who collected a lot of the data of the damned, he called it, the stuff, the rains of frogs from the sky, or the weird creatures appearing where they weren't supposed to, and strange things flying in the sky, all that. He just collected this stuff. And instead of trying to impose a belief system upon it, he kind of let his beliefs emerge from the data. And I think that's a really good way of looking at this stuff, because someone might say that, an alien, two big-headed aliens came in their bedroom and abducted them and took them on a spaceship and probed them, and, the usual sort of stuff that you hear. Now, I can believe that that person really believes that. But if they tell me that that alien told them that they were the chosen one and that the Earth is going to end in, November of 2015, I can believe that they had that experience. I can believe that they're telling me the truth, but I don't necessarily have to believe their explanation for it. So what I see in the paranormal is what seems like there's a lot of different things going on. Someone might say that, someone might isolate the idea of ghosts and the idea of consciousness outside of the body. They might isolate that from people that talk about UFO encounters or strange beings that they meet. But I think there might be something beneath all of it, like a commonality. And what appeals to me, because again, I don't want to get stuck in the reality tunnel and exclude other possibilities. But it's clear that people have paranormal anomalous experiences, and it's clear that these are deeply meaningful to them. It also seems to be clear that whatever is behind a lot of these manifestations has a trickster element to it that a lot of people have talked about. George Hansen wrote a great book about the trickster, called The Trickster and the Paranormal. So this, whatever it's behind all this, it likes to play with us. It's kind of having fun with us, and it likes to always be sort of one step ahead of where we are. At least that's what it seems like. So just as soon as we start thinking that it's aliens and spaceships, the phenomenon changes, so that these aren't just spaceships that are appearing. Suddenly they're, balls of light, or these beings just kind of pop up in someone's bedroom, or if we're watching something in the sky, it doesn't just fly away, it just completely disappears. So we start to see, and that's what happened to people who were investigating UFOs in the 70s. J. Allen Hynek, who was, Mr. Swamp Gas when he first encountered this stuff. By the end of his career, he was talking like I'm talking right now. He's thinking, this UFO stuff seems more like the supernatural or the demonic, or instead of just what we assumed it was before. So, I really think there's a lot of evidence that there is a force of some sort that impinges on our consciousness and causes us to have these experiences. I don't think we are necessarily generating them. I think it's more of a symbiotic thing, and that when we're open and we're receptive or in a particular sort of state, that maybe whatever this thing is, it can interface with us a little easier. And I've had another experience I could talk about if we're not out of time, where I think that something like this happened to me, and it's really kind of it is the most disturbing. That seeing those lights after asking to see them was the most kind of ontologically challenging thing that's ever happened to me as far as my understanding of reality. But the incident where I felt there was a contact with something, that was the most chilling.
Oh. So when did that happen?
Okay, this was 1996, and I remember because there was an enormous snowstorm on the East Coast, paralyzing snowstorm. And I happened to be at a bed and breakfast with my girlfriend, and we got caught in the snowstorm, so we were stuck in this bed and breakfast in West Virginia, rural West Virginia, about a few miles outside of a town called Berkeley Springs. And at the time, I was taking melatonin. Do you know what melatonin is?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. People take it for sleep, for jet lag. Yeah. It's a neurohormone that's mostly concentrated, interestingly, in the pineal gland, which is where the mystics have always said the third eye, resides, and that's where our psychic abilities center, things like that. But I was taking melatonin because I found that it really enhanced my dreams. And as I upped the dosage, I was trying to find out, how high to go before, it would be counterproductive or something. But I was taking about 30 milligrams of melatonin, whereas most, at the time, most people took 3 milligrams. Now it's even lower. They found out you can even take half a milligram or 1 milligram to get the effects for jet lag or to help you sleep. So I was really ramping this stuff up. And it's not psychoactive. It's not like a drug or anything. But what I found is when I dream, man, I mean, it was like dreaming in vivid Technicolor 3D with, intricate plots and, all these characters, these just super complex, really deep, interesting, sometimes scary dreams, but always so much more intense. So that's what's going on while I'm at this bed and breakfast. So my girlfriend dozes off to sleep. I pop my 10 times the normal dose of melatonin, right? And I fell asleep. And at some point later, somewhere in the middle of the night, I woke up, complete darkness, and I opened my eyes. And as soon as I opened my eyes, I knew there was something bad in my bedroom. I mean, something horrifying, something that was not just malevolent and evil, but something that could extinguish me. I mean, I really felt like I was going to die. And it was I think it's probably the most scared.
Did you know this girl a long time then, or?
Yeah. She's sound asleep, she's having her normal dreams, and I'm lying there with my eyes open, and then I realized I can't move my body at all. And I knew, because I'd read about these things before, that it was classic sleep paralysis, okay, which crosses every culture. Every culture, essentially, that's been studied in depth talks about sleep paralysis. They have a myth. If you're in one culture, it's an old hag riding you. This witchy woman sitting on your chest, crushing out your breath. In another, it's a demon. But cross-culturally, the experience is always described as something malevolent, something bad, something demonic or evil. And that's kind of interesting, because you would think, well, you might wake up paralyzed, but that wouldn't necessarily trigger the sense that there's something that wants to kill you in your room, but it happens that way. That's a classic element of sleep paralysis, is the sense that even if you don't see it, that there's something other that is there and it's threatening. And I mean, my heart was, I thought either I was going to die strictly of fright, or this thing was going to get me, whatever it was. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, It was just a thick, heavy presence. Or my heart was going to explode from the fear, I mean, I have truly never been that terrified in my entire life. And then I don't remember what happened after that. That's the strange thing. I mean, I don't know if I fell back to sleep, if something else happened. But the following morning, I woke up, and my girlfriend, Julie, was her name, she looked at me funny, and she goes, "What's that on your chest?" And I looked down, and I saw what was a handprint on my chest. But it was bright red, like almost as if someone had just slapped me or even painted it on with a stencil or something like that. And she says, "Oh, you probably were just sleeping on your hand," So I think, well, yeah, that's probably what it was. But when I tried to fit my hand on the print, it didn't work. There was no way I could twist either of my hands to make that impression. And then I noticed that the handprint was a lot bigger than my handprint. The fingers were like, almost 2 inches longer than mine were. And, again, this isn't like a smudge or, like a mark you might get from just resting your hand against your leg or something like that. This was bright and vivid, as if it had been painted on my skin. So I'm like, well, I'm going to go look at this a little closer in the mirror. So I went in the mirror and looked at it, and again tried to fit my hand to it. And then I realized the scariest thing of all was this handprint had 6 fingers. 6 distinct fingers, a thumb, and not 4 fingers, a thumb and 5 other fingers. So I showed Julie, and she started looking at me, really strangely. And, this is a long time ago, but since then I've thought about this a lot. Before I went on Coast to Coast program, I called her up again, just out of the blue, and said, "Hey, do you remember that?" She says, "Yeah, I really prefer not to think about that, what happened there." And so, maybe after about 25 minutes or so, the handprint just faded and went away. And what the hell was that? It would be one thing if it had just been sleep paralysis, because feeling something else in the room with you is a classic symptom of sleep paralysis, and there's various scientific ways to explain what's happening. One is that your brain wakes up, but the part of your brain that keeps your body from moving while you're dreaming is still affecting you. So your brain wakes up, but your body is still paralyzed. And the general scientific consensus is somehow that generates this fear of another entity. But I can't see where just finding yourself paralyzed would necessarily and cross-culturally create the sense that there's something bad, that there's an entity in your vicinity, this bad thing that wants to get you. So, but even so, okay, sleep paralysis, fine. I believe that I did have a sleep paralysis incident, but how does sleep paralysis leave a 6-fingered, bright red handprint on your skin? That's where it all breaks down for me.
Yeah. Did you check the owner of the B&B?
Pretty nice people, They, I don't think it was like, Rosemary's Baby or anything. Some secret cult going on. But and they had let us stay an extra day because we couldn't go anywhere. No, I didn't sense any strangeness about the people around or anything like that. It really felt like whatever that experience was, it enabled contact with something. And it's definitely something I would prefer not to contact again. I mean, for the absolute, just utter sense of evil that was, that was palpable in the air, it was thick in the air, that this was not good. This wasn't a space brother coming down to enlighten me. This wasn't some neutral thing. It felt absolutely terrifyingly pure evil.
Well, where do you think that would come from, Bud?
God knows, man. When I've talked about this before, there's lots of ways to react to it. I mean, if you're a fundamentalist religious person, you say, "Oh, it's a demon,"
Right.
You got to stop, reading those terrible books and pick up your Bible and read the Bible every day and things like that. A psychologist would say it's, somehow if they're on the fringe of psychology, they might say somehow my body made that handprint appear. But sometimes I think the most parsimonious explanation, the simplest explanation, might be the best. And in this case, I think that maybe the melatonin, created some sort of experience that allowed me to make contact with something, or for something to get through and make contact with me. And the neat thing about melatonin, I discovered, is that it's in the chemical class of tryptamines, which includes psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in magic mushrooms, written about quite a bit, and DMT, which is a very potent psychedelic substance that when people take it, they often talk about entities, contacting entities that they believe are very real. Even though they realize they're taking a chemical and it's changing the way their brain works, a lot of these people that have DMT experiences say, well, yeah, I realized I took a chemical, but at the same time, paradoxically, these beings that I met, these, sort of not imaginary, but imaginal beings are real. I mean, they will swear that they are real. So, is melatonin similar, as a similar chemical? Does it enable, contact? I don't know. I remain agnostic about it, again, for that reason, that I don't like to grab onto a belief and hold to it. But there's certainly a part of me that feels like whatever that thing was, it was real, and it left a physical mark on me, and I have to come to grips with that.
I'm going to take some melatonin tonight.
Yeah, be careful.
Oh, hey, I'm always in for a good time.
Yeah. I wouldn't wish that sort of fear on anyone, but melatonin itself is a really, really fascinating substance, and the dream, the way it changes dreams and just kind of alters the content, alters the intent, really ramps up the intensity of dreams. It's really fascinating, and I do think it's a great way to explore your dream world, in a deeper way. It's very useful for that. Some people, it helps them have lucid dreams too, which are, again, have you ever had a lucid dream? Have you ever?
Me personally, no.
Okay.
No, I know people that have, and even still tell me now to this day, that they have real lucid dreams. I almost think I compare it almost to the remote viewing sort of idea. It seems like quite often people that I've talked to that have had them always are not themselves in the dreams. Like there's somebody else, if they see themselves in a mirror or they see their hands, or it's not who they are now. So I have, who knows?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's all sorts of models for all this stuff. I mean, you can go back to, Western occultism has the idea that we have, an astral sort of body that when we dream, travels and goes places. And you look at Robert Monroe's, book Journeys Out of the Body, which, popularized the concept of out of body experiences. And there are lots of models and frameworks for this stuff. What fascinated me, though, and what freaked me out, is that that there was a physical component to what happened that night, and I mean,
well, does that freak you out because it makes it real?
Yeah, I mean, nothing is more real than seeing this thing on your chest, and that's like seeing those two lights. When I asked to see those two lights, I mean, it's one thing to hear of other people seeing things. It's quite another to ask to see something strange like that, and then to actually have it show up. Yeah. So, the idea that UFOs are just spaceships flying around, is certainly they could be. They could be that. They could be something else too, but they definitely are interested in our consciousness. You talk to a lot of people. I talked to someone recently who was describing his experience in New York during the big Hudson Valley UFO wave, and he was driving along in his car with his girlfriend, and they were both freaking out and crying at one point because this thing was sort of at treetop level and seemed to be following them. They turn down another road, and here it comes following them. And but you talk to people who have these experiences, and they say, oh, absolutely, that thing was, it was reading me. It was interacting with my consciousness. It wasn't just tracking me from above. It was it was in my head. It was somehow connecting with me on a psychic level. And if you read the literature, that's so common, and that's what started to freak out the UFO researchers who so desperately wanted to just tie this up scientifically and say, oh, it's spaceships and things like that. Is that when people start talking about, yeah, I had this encounter, and then in my house the next day things were falling off the table and bouncing off the walls. They're talking about poltergeist activity. So these people that wanted to be scientifically respectable and nail down this alien visitation, well, the evidence was saying something else, and that was a big debate. It was a big divide in ufology for a long time. People wanted to bury the weirder stuff that was happening to these witnesses, but I think that's where the real story is.
So how do you? Back. How do I say it? Now the Area 51 and that whole thing. So what do you think happened there?
Yeah, when it comes to like Area 51 and Roswell, and it's like the stuff Bob Lazar was talking about, reverse engineering spaceships and everything. I mean, I've been studying this stuff since I was a kid. I mean, it's been a passion of mine. So I've read everything. I mean, I've read every perspective out there, and I have a hard time grasping on to a particular narrative, say Area 51, that there are aliens that were found there, or Roswell. I believe something happened at Roswell. I just think it's been so long, and there's been so much misinformation, disinformation, hucksterism, frauds and hoaxes and things that have just accumulated, that I have a hard time grabbing onto anything that I can say, this is what happened, this is what it is. I've seen plenty of footage of stuff flying around at Area 51 that is, rather remarkable and advanced compared to, what we conventionally understand as human technology. Now, whether that is, some sort of reverse engineered alien craft. Maybe, I don't know. All I know is that the problem with ufology is people, they'll grab onto Bob Lazar's story about, hey, I was a guy they brought in, reverse engineer the UFO, and then that's where they're stuck. This is it. This is the truth. This is what happened. I've seen so much nonsense, and I've seen so much deception, and there's deception from government levels, as we know, with what was done to poor Paul Benowitz and other researchers who were basically tormented by the government, just fed disinformation until Benowitz just lost his marbles, and wound up killing himself. So there's just so much stuff out there that my focus has always been, I think where we really get to understand what's happening is when we talk to people. We hear their stories, we listen to them. What happened to that person? That guy that came up to me after a talk and told me about him and his girlfriend being terrified as they were driving their car because this thing, this light above the trees kept following them. Like, I want to hear what he thinks, I want to hear what she thinks. I want to hear the stories from actual people who are having these experiences. I think the farther out you get when you're talking to, about, retired military guys who say they saw aliens and stuff like that, I just don't know. Like, I can't grab onto that stuff. I think the real core of the mystery, and if we're ever going to make any progress, if we ever get past the tricks this trickster's throwing at us, is going to be by listening to the people who have these experiences. Because what these things are doing, whatever it is they're interfacing with our consciousness. Like, that's where they're dealing with us. They're physical, sure. I mean, there's abundant evidence that, everything from, circles on the ground and fields where, people saw something, photographic evidence, video evidence. There's definitely a physical component. But I think where they're going for us is our minds. Like, that's where the real stuff is happening. So that's what I try to look into and understand and write about and talk about, whether it's fiction or whether it's nonfiction.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
well, it's really interesting. I mean, you could go talk about that forever. I mean, in sense, there's just so much there.
Yeah, it's there, and it's so frustrating at the same time. I mean, we really haven't come very far, especially when it comes to understanding anomalous stuff in the sky. There was a point, where, when YouTube became a phenomenon, and all of a sudden, I mean, you've got UFO videos popping up left and right every day. But the problem is CGI technology is so good that, anyone can fake this stuff and it can look really convincing, and there's no way to really analyze it. The best photographic evidence we have of UFOs is from the 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then into the 80s, and once things became digital, it's over. It's a swamp. I can't trust anything I see as a video on the internet, and that's really hurt the serious study of ufology. And also, once the abduction phenomenon became so big, that also is sort of a dead end. It's how many of the stories do you have to hear? I've talked to credible, really smart, sane people who have had these things interfering in their lives, and it's been traumatic for most of them. They don't like it, especially when their children start having these experiences too. But we haven't gotten anywhere. It's like, where else is there to go? We hear the stories. They're marginalized by most people. It's only strange people like us that like to talk about this stuff. But But this is something that's really happening. And, where we really see its influences in popular entertainment, popular culture. I mean, the little gray alien head with the big eyes, as of 20 years ago, that was only found in a few reports. Now, kids have them on their backpacks, so maybe that's the way this presence is actually getting into our reality, is by appearing in our entertainment, is taking over our mythology that way. Because it really is now. I mean, everyone knows the big-headed, spindly little gray alien. It's like what fairies were in old Europe. It's like what monsters. It's like what mythological creatures were to people in the past. These. So, it's endlessly fascinating, and it's also endlessly frustrating. But I'm determined, I'm determined to keep poking at this thing and maybe come, even a tiny bit closer to figuring it out.
Yeah, well, it seems like it's the old saying, the more you know, the less you really understand.
That's absolutely true, and another reason why when someone comes to me with their answers, oh yeah, these are guys from Zeta Reticuli, they manifest in the 8th dimension, and this and that. I'm like, well, that's cool that you believe that, but I can't go there. I can't go there because the more I see, the more I talk to people, the more I hear their stories, the more I realize it's not easy. It's not an easy subject to wrap your head around. I mean, and it's hiding, I mean, it wants to hide. It wants to play with us, I think, but it wants to hide its true purpose. And whether that's good, bad, I don't know. Again, if you're a fundamentalist Christian, it's quite clear that these things are demonic and that they're trying to lead us astray. I don't necessarily go down that road.
Well, I mean, a lot of the information that they're going by, again, it becomes a belief in a sense of something that was passed down. I mean, how much can you rely on the words of the Bible? Now I'm going to get bad emails here, but I mean that in the sense that, look at even with our technology and our information now, the way we've got smartphones and computers and all the stuff now, and look at when an actual incident happens now. And even though they've got it on film, like a murder or a shooting, look at what's happened in St. Louis there, right?
Right.
And even though people can go over the video and the pictures and the sound, you have 100 different answers for it, and everybody sees it different, and everybody writes it differently.
Yeah.
So back in the times when they didn't have any of that, and you had the same thing, I just, and how people can go by, I think what I'm saying is the exact words. So something's written in the Bible, and then they'll say, this is it, and this is what it means. And then you talk to someone else, and they say, no, this is it, and this is what it means.
Yeah, at the same time, though, I mean, I'll put in a good word for the Bible.
Oh, for sure. I'm not.
The Bible talks about.
I wasn't slamming the Bible. I think I'm.
No, I'm not saying it were. I'm not saying it were.
It's just.
But there are, the stuff we're talking about. I mean, there are, Ezekiel's vision of the wheel. Was that something in the sky he literally saw? Or was that induced by endogenous DMT in his brain, or because he was, smoking some shrub he found out in the desert, or, that the Bible talks about the Nephilim, which were the fallen angels who came to Earth and found that they really kind of liked Earth women, and when you compare the story of the Nephilim who are coming to Earth and impregnating women on the Earth, well, there's a very direct analogy between, the UFO abduction lore, where people, or, women are saying they're impregnated, the babies are taken away, things like that. So, mythology, I think we can find answers in all sorts of places. And, the Bible sure has its share of weird of weird anomalous experiences. I mean, it happens to be interpreted a lot of different ways by people, but if you just look at the raw experiences that are chronicled, there's some strange stuff. Angels, devils, visions. It's
And I think that's kind of what I was getting at more, that there's so much there to just interpret it and say, this is what it is. This is what happened.
Yeah. I mean, it's literal. It's a literalism that kills thinking. When it's this is the way it's written, this is the way it is. Well, if you actually know the Bible, you know that it's a bunch of books that that a certain council decided were the official books, and there's lots and lots of other books, including the Gnostic Gospels and books that were left out of the Bible that are have some really fascinating ideas that are different than what we read in the standard King James. That was that this is the book, this is the divine word. And then you look at differences in translation from the Aramaic to Greek and then then to Latin and so forth. And so it's I think most reasonable people understand that you can't look at any spiritual text literally, the literal creationist thing and all that. I mean, it's metaphorical. If you look at it metaphorically, there was darkness, then there was, water on the face of the earth, and then there were plants, and then there were animals, and then people came along, and so really the story of Genesis is a beautiful analogy of evolution. So they work together. Science and these myths often illuminate science just in a different way.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and so to touch off, then, so what do you think about the after death?
Yeah, I've done a lot of research into near-death experiences. I find them incredibly fascinating. Especially the reports. There's a woman named Pam Reynolds, probably the most astounding case. I mean, this is a woman who had her body was cooled down. I mean, her brain was shut down, her heart was shut down, and she was actually, they used cold temperatures to essentially keep her in sort of a state of suspended animation in a way. And she had, her eyes were covered with gauze, and she had these little devices in her ears that would click and make loud clicking sounds because they could follow along just kind of very basic low-level brain activity by these clicks. So she's got these things clicking in her ears. Her heart is stopped. Her brain is essentially, very, very little EEG activity, if any. And yet when she comes back, when they bring her back after the surgery, she's talking about things that happened in another room. She's talking about conversations that were going on. And those near-death experiences called veridical. That means, there's actual data that is available that person should not have been able to see or experience. And near-death experiences are controversial, but and I understand. I mean, it's a drastic change in our mindset to think that consciousness is not just embedded in the meat of the brain, but the whole idea of that, to show, like the whole white crow idea, you don't have to show that all crows are white to say that they're white. You only have to find one white crow to show that not all crows are black. If there is a case, and a lot of these well-studied cases are really difficult to explain unless you consider that consciousness can somehow exist outside of the body. And, a lot of people have tried to explain it by, its lack of oxygen to the brain, or or some form of neurotransmitter that we don't understand. Well, the problem is when we lack oxygen to the brain, we get confused. And what people that have near-death experiences report, they say they're more lucid than they've ever been in their entire life. That the reality that they're experiencing is hyper real. It's extremely real. It's multisensory. And when you have someone who's dying and their brain is the oxygen levels in their brain go down, they get confused. They get, it's the exact opposite of what these people are describing. And again, some people have tended to look at a near-death experience as though it's people reliving their birth trauma, or it's just some archetypal psychological thing, the idea of a tunnel, the idea that there are other beings there, or people that we know have died that are there. And once again, I go back to maybe the most parsimonious explanation, the one that people say that they're experiencing. Who knows? Maybe they are dead. Maybe they're dying and they are seeing people who have died, and maybe there is some sort of afterlife. I don't know. I don't pretend to know, but it certainly opens that possibility. And the more data that accumulates about these things, I think it's harder to dismiss that is at least a possibility, even though the rationalist debunker absolutely cannot possibly believe. I think it's better to let the data kind of take your ideas about what could happen or might not happen. And if you follow the data, it's pretty provocative.
Wow. Well, now we could just keep talking forever. Let's do 3 shows. Come on.
All right, sure. Anytime. This is the stuff that fascinates me. So I love having conversations about it. I'll tell you one quick thing, because it happened not that long ago. As we talked about lucid dreams, and then you brought up near-death experiences. I had a lucid dream a few months ago, and in this dream, there was a light in the sky, but it was more like a doorway sort of thing. And I felt myself being pulled towards this light. And as I entered and the light started to enfold me, it was blissful. It was absolutely blissful, the same way people describe near-death experiences. And all of a sudden, I'm just immersed in this joyful, absolutely 100% pure bliss. I became lucid in that dream. And I thought, holy shit, I could be dying right now. Am I dying? Am I in bed dying? And is this, am I going down this freaking tunnel? And instantly it snapped me out of the dream. And I was so freaked out by this because it was so real. And so, the feeling it was so indescribably beautiful. But then the possibility that wow, man, am I having a stroke? Yeah. Am I dying right now? My poor kids and my wife, I'll never see them again. Just to be snapped back and to think that, maybe that's what was happening. I was disturbed, from the, part of me, of course, thought, wow, what would have happened in that dream if I had kept going? Yeah, but the other part of me was like, well, it's a good thing you didn't find out, because I don't want to go, knock on wood. I hope to have a lot more things ahead in my life and my experiences and everything than to go into that tunnel in the dream at this age. But wow, man, that was a really hard thing to shake. It's still kind of freaks me out a little bit.
Yeah, makes you say you don't want to go back to sleep.
Well, maybe next time I'll just kind of maybe stick my hand in or something, and maybe not go all the way, just kind of peek in or something. But
don't take so much melatonin.
I haven't been taking melatonin, man. This was completely, it's created out of the endogenous neurotransmitters squirting around in my brain. There wasn't anything added to the mix. But it just shows how these experiences, they're embedded in us. They're in there.
Wow. So what do you think of all the sort of the last few years, well, probably 10 years now, that all the paranormal stuff on TV? I mean, so much of it, as in mediums and ghost hunters and and UFOs and all, just everything. There's a ton of shows now.
I think TV tends to take things to the lowest common denominator level. I think there were some excellent documentaries done in the 80s and 90s. I think when especially as far as ufology goes, where things were being taken pretty seriously. But then it just, at the same time, while this stuff is becoming so prevalent in entertainment, the reality shows about the paranormal, I just think I can't even watch most of them. I mean, I can't do it because, I can't watch someone, walk through a haunted house and, scream because they heard, something, a door creak, that sort of thing. I mean, that's like the lowest level haunted house, carnival ride of the paranormal. And, I think people who really have studied this stuff for a while, it's, that's fun for a lot of people. Maybe it does some good opening some minds, but I know it shuts a lot of minds too, because a lot of people who their inclination is to debunk anything anomalous, any claim of an anomalous experience, because that's what they've seen. They've seen this dreck, this garbage that just is, again, it's the cheapest level of entertainment, and it doesn't really get down into the nitty-gritty of people's experiences, which are complex, which are not easy to quantify, and which don't fit these templates of people going in and ghost busting a house, or it's and
ghost hunting that they never catch one. They actually think they're going to.
Yeah. I mean, it's cheap and it's fun, and a lot of people like it. But if you're really serious about trying to get a grip on these very kind of esoteric and strange experiences that people have, it's not very helpful. I think a lot of times it really does hurt, people like me when I'm giving a public talk or something like that. I have to break through all that garbage.
Well, because they lump you right in there, right?
Yeah, and that's what people, they're fed a diet of this stuff, and that what they don't realize is parapsychology goes back a couple hundred years, and there's some really excellent science that was done to study a lot of these things, from crisis apparitions to telepathy, and spiritualism, things like that. There's a lot of garbage. There's a lot of garbage. There always has been. It's a field that just brings on charlatans and frauds, but there's a really solid body of data and evidence and scholarship that's been compiled over a couple centuries, and no one knows about that. You don't know about that unless you really want to know about it, and you find it and you dig, and that's that's the problem with a lot of debunkers. I think it's great to be skeptical, but if you don't know what you're talking about, if you don't know the history, if you've never studied parapsychology, if you don't know what kind of experiments have been done and are being done, then I really can't take your opinion very seriously when you say psychic research is a waste of time and there's nothing to it.
Yeah. They're they're building their lives off of what they've seen on TV.
Yeah, and you can't blame them. I mean, if I, in the same way that I might have an opinion about, I don't know, some subject I'm not that familiar with. These people are well intentioned, and they think they're doing the right thing. They think they're combating, sloppy thinking and dangerous thinking. But if you haven't actually taken the time to look at the data, then you're just blowing hot air, and that's fine. It's America. Hey, you can get on your blog and say that I'm completely out of my mind, and those lights I saw were a hallucination, obviously, and the handprint on my chest was there's some easy explanation for it. That's fine. I've had people tell me that, but at the same time, if you want to debunk something, you really should understand it. You really should understand the history of it. And nowadays, it's just easy to sign up for the James Randi Education Foundation and get your newsletter and go on bulletin boards telling people they're insane. Telling people they're full of shit.
Well, yeah, and it's easy. It's easier for them now with because I know I get the emails and tweets and stuff. It's easier now because it's not that they say it's right. It's just they're untouchable in a way.
Yeah, anonymity feeds into it. But there's also this the trollishness that's just part of our online lives. I mean, a lot of people get off on puffing themselves up and telling other people they're stupid, instead of what I think is a more reasonable approach to just about all human relations, which is to try to listen to people and understand them. Don't the idea that you have to label someone and immediately shut down what they're telling you, that's profoundly ugly, I think. And that's another thing. That's why I talk about this stuff publicly. I mean, a lot of people are like, why do you tell these stories, man? I mean, people are going to think you're out of your mind, and plenty of people do. That's great. But when I talk about this stuff publicly, when I give a talk on UFOs, it's like 50, 100 people, whatever, in the audience. Afterward, people come up to me and they say, you know what, I have to tell you what happened. And they go on and tell me the story. And it's usually something they haven't been able to share with a lot of other people, because they know they're going to be ridiculed, they know they're going to be laughed at, they know they're going to be told they're nuts. It could hurt them professionally if they talk about this too widely. But when you let someone know, like you do with your show, and like other people do with their shows, that it's okay to talk about these things in a realm where you're not being judged a priori. You're not being judged in advance that what you're telling is horseshit. But instead, you're going to be listened to, and you're going to be respected for talking about your experiences. People come out of the woodwork, and that's why, the hardcore skeptics will say, well, how come more people don't, have these experiences? Why is it always hicks and driving their, pickups to get abducted by aliens in West Virginia, get probes stuck up their butt? Why isn't it why isn't it a scientist or something? We're like, hey, well, you know what? There are scientists who have had these experiences, but are they going to, and I've talked to some of them. I've talked to one of a talk I gave a couple of years ago. A woman who was a stewardess on an airline attendant, came up and she wanted to draw for me what she saw, which was this structured thing, and she said, I saw this thing as clear as day out the window. And she made some notes for me and all that. She's like, but you please cannot put my name on this, because, this could screw up my career. And, so it's unfortunate that we've built this culture that on the one hand, forces people to hide these very meaningful things that happen in their lives. And at the same time, we have this other culture that feeds on, knocking these people down and telling them they're crazy and telling them they should shut up and that they're charlatans and, actively, going after them viciously. It's awful, So that's why I do talk publicly, because I want to hear those stories. And every time I do talk publicly, people get in touch. I was on Coast to Coast. I got this flurry of emails like, oh, please let me explain what happened, things like that. And, so I'm happy. I'm fine. I don't care what anyone thinks about my mental capacity, or my, or whether I'm nuts or not. I'm pretty confident in who I am. So I have no problem talking honestly about things, because I think that's the only way to understand what's happening to other people is be open, listen, don't get stuck on judging it as this or that. Like Jerome Clark said, one of my favorite writers on the paranormal, he said, you can believe people's stories. You can believe what they're telling you, that's what they believe happened to you, but you don't have to believe their explanation for it. You just have to listen. And most people are being truthful when they're talking to you, They're hucksters, frauds, charlatans. Most people, if you get in a conversation with them and they're talking about something, that really affected them deeply or shook them up or shook up their beliefs, they're telling you the truth, You might not believe their explanation, but they're generally telling you something real that happened to them, and I think they should be respected for that.
Yeah. Oh, totally. I think the U.S. has kind of gone in a labeling and narcissist way, right? And so it's hard to say anything. I mean, if you say something like you like a person or you like, like I was talking about Russell Brand off
Mm-hmm.
I say, well, I like him. Then all of a sudden there's people that respond to me going, oh, you're just a liberal. It's like,
right, yeah,
it's just a label you, it's like, that's it. Well, that's what you are. And it's like,
with especially with social media, things have become so immediate and so geared toward immediate responses, and I do believe that, every time, oh, somebody liked my post, there's something happening in your brain. There's a little squirt of dopamine somewhere.
Yeah.
And the same thing happens when, that's why a lot of the things that people focus on and comment on are things that are emotionally appealing, or generate either outrage or, anger. Oh man, how could that woman beat her kid in that video? So it gives us a focus of outrage, and I think a lot of people like that. That's another squirt of dopamine somewhere in the reward centers of your brain. You're activated. You're made hyper alert. You're emotionally invested in these things, and then you go on to the next story. Oh, then so it's this. We're constantly needing stimulation, I think. And I think that's dangerous, when there's always a need to be hyper-stimulated. You lose the ability to go sit down, like read a book, become immersed in your inner world when you've got all these distractions, all these things pulling your energy, pulling your consciousness into them, these like little bits of outrage or little bits of, humor or whatever. And, I think it's kind of fragmenting us a lot as people.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because a lot of the outrage and stuff you get on Facebook or Twitter is just about being outraged.
That's it. Yeah. We have a culture of outrage. We go from one outrage to another. And the more, if you're on the liberal end of the spectrum, you see these, crazy conservatives, saying, there's no such thing as climate change and because the Bible says so, and, homosexuals should be, beaten, stoned, and then, if you're on the conservative side, you see, some of the more wacky things, liberal people are saying, and it builds this insular world, where you're just in this constant little echo chamber of outrage, and that's not conducive to understanding things we need to understand. It's not conducive to communicating with each other and trying to actually make things a little bit better. All it does is just solidify the walls between us, and it's just nothing but people talking to each other about the same stuff all the time.
Yeah, just about conclusions, not really about what's happened.
Right, exactly, yeah. And it's just emotional reactions, visceral reactions to things, more so than an intellectually stimulating conversation. It's not a conversation. It's here's what I believe, this is awful. Oh yeah, well, here's where you're wrong, and this is why you're awful. You smart people and can navigate social media, but even I think it pulls it. There's a lot of great things with being connected as we are, but I think we're still working out some of the kinks, and some of this stuff in the long run, I think we're going to find is not really helping us. It's not pushing things in the right direction. In some ways, it is.
Yeah.
But there are there's some things we got to figure out.
Yeah. I sometimes it's hard not to respond.
It is. Sure, it is. It's our natural instinct. It's like a primal instinct. Hey, somebody put something up on my wall. That offends me. Well, that's that feels like an attack on me. It's a primal thing. And in the past, the way these things happen is we'd be out driving around and someone would cut us off, and hey, that's the visceral gut reaction. You flip them off, they flip you off, or what have you. But these things were not constant, and now we just have, I think, these sorts of things that feel like attacks on us. They're constant, because of the culture of outrage and because of the way we get off on being provoked or offended. It's a real visceral feeling, and that's why I take little breaks. I take time and go read books. I meditate, and I find that time is edifying, and that's the time when the sort of stresses of life drop away, and you can actually learn a bit about yourself or do some real creative thinking. And it's hard to do that when you're plugged in constantly.
Yeah, totally. Mm-hmm. Well, I like you.
Hey, great! I like you too. This is my. I love podcasts because it's a medium that allows for these kind of conversations to take place. And far-ranging, diverging tangents and things like that. You can get that. You can do that on a podcast. You can take the time and really get to have a conversation with somebody and know somebody that you can't do in a quick 5-minute video or it's an intimate way of having conversations that I think is being lost. And so I really applaud people like yourself that take the time and your energy and create these sort of forums where people can have really fun and interesting conversations.
Yeah, I love them. I've been a radio man all my life.
That's great, man. I love radio too. With all these new technologies, sometimes there's nothing better than just listening to a talk show on the radio or listening to a podcast. When I was a kid, I'd sleep, I'd sneak my radio in my bed and listen to, mystery theater and these dramas on TV and on the radio. And that's great stuff. That fueled my imagination. And, what I see people like yourself doing is also giving a lot of other people a voice that they're not going to be on, cable TV. They're not going to be on, the big radio stations, things like that. But opening these forums up for people to just talk about whatever the thing is. It's great. It's a fantastic fantastic medium. I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thanks. I'm excited about it. I love doing it. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, man. Well, just keep it up.
I will. I'm going to do it till I'm gone. till I get taken away.
Yeah, stay away from that light if you see it in your dreams, though.
Yeah, none of that.
Well, wait for the the appointed time for that.
Yeah, wait till I don't have a choice. So let's. Do you have contact information for anybody listening if they want to get hold of you?
Absolutely. The best way to find me and my stuff is my website, which is Micheal M, the letter M, Hughes, HUGHES.com. So it's michealmhughes.com. You can also, of course, nowadays just Google Micheal M. Hughes and it'll be the first thing that comes up. So there you can find, some, if you're into UFOs, I've got a link to a presentation I did last year, that covers a lot of the stuff we talked about here. My writing about pop culture, True Detective was I had a really lot of stuff going on with that show that was fun. Other stuff about pop culture, technology, and especially the paranormal stuff. And also, please, if you like fun, scary stories that go into some of the things we talked about, please consider picking up Blackwater Lights and then follow it up with Witch Lights. And the final part of the trilogy will be out next year. I've found that the audience that really likes my books the most are people who like the kind of things you talk about here as well, because I bring in elements of the paranormal and I try to make it very real as I can make it. So my audience a lot of the time is people who love the stuff you talk about, but it's also people that just like fun stories, fun, spooky stories that go to dark places. So if that sounds like something you like, please check out the books. If you like them, drop a review online. That's always helpful. Say hi. I have a newsletter too. So the easiest way to really keep up, if I'm doing a talk in your area or if I have a new video or something like that, is just go to the website, sign up for the newsletter. I send it out only when I have something to talk about, not regular spam. So I hope some of the people that listen might stop by, tell me your stories. I love to hear other people's stories, things that happen in their lives, for the reasons I talked about, because it helps me understand the things that happen to me.
Okay, that's great. And of course, we'll have it all posted on our website and let everybody know. Yeah,
fantastic.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it didn't drone on too long, but it's fun. I think the most interesting things in life are the things that we don't understand, things that just continue to remain mysterious. And keep doing the great work you're doing. And if you ever want me to come back on, I'd be happy to be back on again too. So keep up the good work.
Oh, thank you. And we will.
Show is over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of the Z-Talk Radio Network.
I'll be back.